We're going to be talking about Shimei today. Y'all know who Shimei is? Last week we were in the New Testament and with Ananias and Sapphira. This week we're back in the Old Testament. As a matter of fact, we're back in David's timeline. Where David is, we'll talk more about that here in just a second. He's on the run again. But before we get into that, have you guys ever messed with vinegar and baking soda before? No?
What? Yes.
Like,
when you make a red velvet cake.
Or the volcano when you're a kid, you know, you mix vinegar and baking soda together. It's and there's all kinds of uses for it. And this kind of deal. Anyways, the thing about those two substances, and okay, so our guy, don't forget what? Yeah, there he is. The guy that wrote this book, read the book, good guy, good lesson for bad guys. The guy that wrote this book is a rocket scientist. Okay, works for NASA. So he, of course, spends like the first 2 pages of his book talking about so apparently when you're up in space and you need to have a rocket engine ignite, you can't use oxygen, obviously, so they have to have two substances that when they meet together, they are explosive. And, he had some fancy term for it. I don't know what it was. There we go. Hey. All right. Let's see if I can get it to give me the editor's view or something. Yeah, that's it. Good. Okay. So he talks about this idea that when two things come together, they're explosive. And so we have an example of that in Shimei. So David was a pretty polarizing figure. He kind of made a mess of things. You hear in his history about his adultery with Bathsheba, and it was just I don't know. For a guy after God's own heart, he was just kind of a messy dude. So he had a son named Absalom, and his son Absalom was in active rebellion right now. He was like the favored one, and that kind of deal. And so he was running from Absalom at this point. And so our story takes place in 2 Samuel. We're going to be in several different places, but we're going to be in 2 Samuel 16 to start with. And then we're also going to be in 2 Samuel 19 and then 2 Kings as well. We'll get to that in just a second. So to set the scene, David is fleeing again, and he's going through this area. We'll just read this part of the story. So 2 Samuel 16, 5 through 14. Yeah, go ahead. Thanks,
5 through 14.
That's correct.
Okay. As King David approached Bahurim, a man from the same clan as Saul's family came out from there. His name was Shimei, son of Gera, and he cursed as he came out. He pelted David and all the king's officials with stones, so all the troops in the central guard were on David's right and left. As he cursed, Shimei said, get out, you murderer, you scoundrel. The Lord has repaid you for all the blood you shed in the household of Saul, in whose place you have reigned. The Lord has given the kingdom into the hands of your son Absalom. You have come to ruin because you are a murderer. Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and cut his head off. But the king said, what does this have to do with you, you son of Zeruiah? He was cursing because the Lord said to him, curse David. Who can ask, why do you do this? David then said to Abishai and all his officials, my son, my own flesh and blood is trying to kill me. How much more than this Benjamin? Leave him alone, let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look upon my misery and restore to me his covenant blessing instead of his curse today. So David and his men continued along the road while Shimei was going along the hillside opposite him, cursing as he went and throwing stones at him and showering him with dirt. The king and all the people with him arrived at their destination exhausted, and there he refreshed himself.
Okay. So thanks, Zach. So picture this scene, right? So they're just walking along, minding their own business. All of a sudden, this guy Shimei comes out of the. I guess maybe they're walking through like a ravine or something like that, and you hear this, what is that noise? And all of a sudden, they're walking through this ravine, and they're getting pelted with rocks and kicking dirt on them and that kind of thing. So tell me, what led to Shimei's outburst against David? What does he call him? Murderer, right? Yeah, like the murders of the house of Saul is on your head, right? The next question is was he justified in doing this?
Was what he's saying was true or justified? Because that's two different things.
Well, and that's actually where I want the whole, or not the whole, one of the major points of the lesson today is whether it was true or not. So the author of the book goes through all of the places where it's refuted that David was the one solely responsible. So basically, what we have going here is that Shimei was basing his outburst on false information. Okay, so this was not necessarily true. Now, David was not blameless, but he was not what Shimei said he was. Okay, so let me ask you this: was it okay for Shimei to do what he did? Should he have reacted that way?
I don't think it's ever right to lose your emotion, lose control of your emotions like that. I mean, what good is going to come out of what you're doing?
Right.
I mean, honestly, yeah, you're getting to voice your displeasure and acting the way you're doing it. But again, David, he's really lucky David didn't tell the guy, okay, go cut his head off.
Yeah.
It would have been over. Maybe that's what he wanted. There's sometimes where people explode like that because they're wanting the reaction from the other person. They're wanting it to escalate to something else. And so.
Interesting, right? So Abishai was his right-hand man. And he was like, you're gonna let that guy talk to you like that? Like, let me go kill him now, because it would be easy. This guy's he does have the higher ground, but he's just a hothead, right? So so Abishai was ready to kill him. How did David respond? What did David say?
Basically, if the Lord told him to do it, then why are you going to stop him?
Yeah, like let him be. The Lord told him to.
Yeah.
Right? Was this strength on David's part or weakness on David's part?
His name was strength. Your response is to defend them, maybe from wrong. So for
Yeah,
my
no.
kids, all my kids is to defend themselves. that's.
It's a natural inclination for a guy to want to defend himself, right? For sure.
Well, I think too.
We're human.
Yeah.
It's just God.
Yeah.
Humanity. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think too, though, there's some restraint there because you can make a bad situation worse. It's already bad. There's nothing good.
Right.
So go make it worse by killing him, and then the house of Saul is even more angry at you. It's like you're repaying one evil for another.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to make it better.
Right. You remember week one? Who was week one of our study? Now I know they don't stack, I get that, but who was it? You remember? Nabal the fool, right? David had just experienced this very thing where he did react in an extremely hot-tempered manner and got cooled off by Abigail. You remember that? So I kind of feel like, why did David react this way? Probably because he had learned his lesson. He was like, okay, last time I wanted to to destroy somebody who didn't help me or badmouthed me, I was met by God put resistance in my way, and so this time I'm gonna chill about it, right? Other thoughts on this part of the story?
Just in reading it, it's interesting because that's into a lot of control for David. Not only did he not respond, he didn't let anybody else respond.
Right.
You know, because their other guys are probably getting hit by rocks too, and they're like, "I'll just go kill that guy." But he told them all, "Just keep moving." You know, I think that shows great restraint on his part, and so I think that's interesting. Plus, his men believed in him, and they followed him, and they knew, okay, he said, "Don't do anything, don't do anything." And so, in rereading that story, it's been a while. It's interesting because you remember this crazy part about the guy throwing rocks on the hillside, making a fool of himself, right? David really did show great restraint. And he showed great leadership for his men, like, just keep moving.
For sure. I mean, we're talking, this is King David, right? He's got an entourage that would do anything for him, and yet he tells them to just, I love, okay, so one of the things that speaks really highly of David is that he says God is telling him to do this. Shimei, God is telling Shimei to react this way, which is interesting to me because I don't know that he knew that per se, other than the fact that he knew God was sovereign over every situation, right? So therefore he's like, well, God is kind of, it's almost like he's admitting God is testing me here, kind of, I guess. I don't know.
I wonder too, how much of it has to do with the fact that Shimei was part of Saul's house.
Yes.
Because David, he didn't want Saul to die. You know what I'm saying? Like he honored Jonathan. I mean, he never went and just tried to eradicate the entire, as a matter of fact, he tried to honor them. And he tried to love that family, you know what I'm saying? And so I'm wondering, because if Shimei had been part of No Name's family, would his response, kind of like Nabal, would have been completely different? Like, yeah, so I don't really have any issue with you doing this because I'm just going to smoke you right here, you know, that kind of thing. Versus he's part of Saul's house.
That's right. And that's why I love teaching this class, man, because that detail was listed and talked about, but I didn't mention it. And so you're exactly right. So this matters because of the fact that he was part of Saul's house. And David is like, look, man, I love those guys. It wasn't, I mean, did I make mistakes and things? Yeah, but I didn't want them to die like that.
Yeah.
Or whatever. So, yep, you nailed it exactly. So Shimei, I mean, yeah, he's mad about it. But his information, that's the thing, is his information is false. Now, there's more to the story, right? So David is fleeing from Absalom's rebellion right now, but Absalom ends up getting killed, and so David returns to Jerusalem. So go with me to a few chapters over to Samuel 19. We'll be in verses 15 through 23. Okay, and I'll read this one. Then the king returned and went as far as the Jordan. Now the men of Judah had come to Gilgal to go out and meet the king and bring him across the Jordan. Enter Shimei. Shimei, son Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, hurried down with the men of Judah to meet King David. With him were 1,000 Benjamites, along with Ziba, the steward of Saul's household, and his 15 sons and 20 servants. They rushed to the Jordan where the king was. They crossed at the ford to take the king's household over and do whatever he wished. When Shimei, the son of Gera, crossed the Jordan, he fell prostrate before the king and said to him, "May my lord not hold me guilty. Do not remember how your servant did wrong on the day my lord left. The king left Jerusalem. May the king put it out of his mind. For I, your servants, know that I have sinned. But today I have come here as the first of the whole house of Joseph to come down and meet my lord the king." Then Abishai, son of Zeruiah, said, "Shouldn't Shimei be put to death for this?" So Abishai is still bitter. I lost my place. He cursed the Lord's anointed. David replied, "What do you and I have in common, you sons of Zeruiah? This day you have become my adversary. Should anyone be put to death in Israel today? Do I not know that today I am king over Israel? Do I not know that today I am king over Israel?" So the king said to Shimei, "You shall not die." And the king promised him on oath. Okay, so the rest of the story is David comes back and Shimei, what does Shimei do? Yeah, he doesn't throw rocks at him anymore, more stones. He brings him and his whole house, like thousands of people, to meet David and just worship him, right? Why the change of heart, you think?
when you know you're wrong, you better make sure that the person you wronged understands that you know what you did. Especially when it's in that type of a situation.
That's right.
I mean, because David had every right to kill him.
He did.
So, I mean, and the fact, and when you are truly repentful, I mean, he could have just sent a messenger. Oh yeah, sorry about that day. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean you're sorry. That just means you're just trying to check the box and say, well, I apologize. Right? He fully commits to the apology.
That's right. And Abishai agrees, right?
Yeah.
I'm cracking up. I'm like, Abishai, he did not forget, so that kind of made me laugh a little bit that Abishai was like that. And so my thought on this is possibly that between the time that David left and came back, that Shimei had gotten the information correct. He may have heard more about the stories, or just may have, calmed down a little bit and realized that it wasn't David after all. So now let's go to 2 Kings, because the story finishes. It's not over yet. So 2 Kings chapter 2 will be in 8 and 9 and then 36 and 46. 2 Kings chapter 2, verses 8 and 9 to start with. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, struck the water with it, and the water wait. Is that right? All right, hold on. 2 Kings 2, 8 and 9. Yeah, okay. Sure, I'm in the right spot. Elijah took his cloak, rolled it up, and struck the water with it. The water divided to the right and the left, and the two of them crossed over on dry ground. When they had crossed, Elijah said to Elisha, "Tell me what I can do for you before I am taken from you. Let me inherit a double portion of your spirit," Elisha replied. And then go over to 36. I don't know, that's not right. Hold on.
I think it's First Kings.
Is it First Kings? Because
It's a great scripture.
it is a great scripture, right? I was like, that is not mentioned. Okay, hold on. It's probably First Kings, but it's actually my notes. First Kings chapter 2. Here we go. Yes, here it is. Okay, this makes more sense. And remember, remember, this is verse 8. You have with you Shimei, son of Gera, the Benjamite from Bahurim, who called down bitter curses on me that day. I went to Mananim. When he came down to meet me at the Jordan, I swore to him by the Lord that I will not put you to death by sword. But now, do not consider him innocent. You are a man of wisdom. You will know what to do with him. Bring his gray head down to the grave in blood. So David's on his deathbed, and he's meeting Solomon. And he goes, "Solomon, you're a wise guy. Why don't you handle Shimei now that I'm going to be gone?" So let's go to verses 36 and 46. Then the king sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your own head." Shimei answered the king, "What you say is good, for your servant will do as my lord the king has said." And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. But 3 years later, 2 of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath, and Shimei was told, "Your slaves are in Gath." At this point, he saddled his donkey and went to Achish and Gath and searched for his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. When Solomon was told that Shimei had gone from Jerusalem to Gath and he had returned, the king summoned Shimei and said to him, "Did I not make you swear by the Lord and warn you on the day you leave anywhere else that you can be sure you will die? At that time you said to me, what you say is good, I will obey. Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you?" The king also said to Shimei, "You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. King Solomon will be blessed, and David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever." Then the king gave the order to Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, and he went out and struck Shimei down and killed him. The kingdom was now firmly established in Solomon's hands. So did Shimei get what was coming to him eventually? Definitely did. So why did David do that? If David was merciful in the beginning, why did he go ahead and figure out a way to have Shimei killed? Was there...
Between the time that he was merciful and the time he said that on his deathbed, was he giving him time to really show a heart change.
Okay.
And didn't see it. I don't know.
Yeah, so maybe you just give them a chance, like, let me give you, see if you'll turn around, okay? A question, this is kind of a rhetorical question. Was there secret animosity? You think David was mad all along and he just didn't show it?
I think Abishai was next to him when he was on his deathbed.
Yeah,
Can I go feel that guy for you?
yeah,
Remember that one time?
yeah.
David rolled his eyes and was like, Solomon, can you just deal with this?
Right.
I wonder how much of it is, so David's on his deathbed, Solomon's going to be the king. And Shimei obviously has a tendency to go from one extreme end of the spectrum to the other as far as allegiance and loyalty. And so, we don't really know Shimei's pull, as far as political weight, but it could be one of those things like a warning to Solomon, like, hey, you need to do something about this because it could be a problem. It could be a thorn in your side later. I mean, it just, there's a lot of politics, I think, behind it. I mean, because honestly, he could have killed him, but instead he showed him mercy and said, look, you're in house arrest, essentially. Don't leave your house. Stay in your house, you'll live. You leave your house, you're dead.
Right.
Very clear, cut and dry. And I mean, it's just one of those that, it was Shimei could have said, yeah, forget it, I don't want to do that, just kill me here. Okay, well, you're dead. Or he could have stayed in his house and lived as old as he wanted to live. So I think I don't know if it may have been David just warning us to Solomon.
It's interesting to me. I think that, okay, so the next question up here, it says, did he have a high view of the Lord's anointed? So I think when you look at what happened way back originally, Shimei was blasting one of God's anointed leaders, right? So that was already bad enough, and David decided to show mercy. But I think in the overarching conversation, there must be a consequence for treating God's anointed people that way. And Shimei did it twice. He threw stones at David and he directly disobeyed Solomon. Both of those, of all the kings to disobey, those are not the ones to disobey, right? So Shimei got plenty of chances. And so I think, the next kind of rhetorical question here is that David was like, look, Shimei can't keep getting away with this, getting after the Lord's anointed kings, and so something has to be done.
Well, if you look back earlier in chapter 2, he was going back through oaths he had made.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that's important because if Shimei, however you play out, if he had broken the oath somehow, then he would have gone against what God had asked him to do. Right? And so before all of this, there are other oaths that he was fulfilling or making sure Solomon knew about, but he could have said, just leave him alone and let him go. That's not what he said. But he did give him every opportunity, right? Like, he really did. He was like, here's a house, stay there, we'll leave you alone.
Well,
Don't be down.
I think too, part of that is David's loyalty to the house of Saul.
Yeah, right.
Died with David on the deathbed. You know what I'm saying? Like basically telling Solomon, you're on your own. You do whatever you want. This was my loyalty that I made to that family. You go do you walk your own path.
Yeah, I mean, that makes perfect sense. I love it. But all of this, it just jives. It's very, and I'll tell you, as a I don't know, a younger person or whatever, when I've read the Old Testament, I've never really just sat and chewed on how these stories play out. And it's really remarkable. It's really cool. So the question, and I think that where I want to finish today is, how does that apply to us? Okay, so some questions to consider are, have you ever jumped to conclusions? Have you ever thrown stones at somebody based on something that might not have been true? Okay. And then the better question of that, though, is what if your information is accurate? You still need to be throwing stones. I really don't think so. The middle question talks about, have you been on the receiving end of that? Have you ever had stones being thrown at you? But I really would actually like to focus on that third bullet there, which is, do you think that non-Christians might have a negative view of Christianity because we are quick to throw stones?
Oh yeah. I mean, I've grown up in the church. I mean, I know some people tell me, there used to be the saying that people used to think, oh, Church of Christ people are the only ones think they're going to be in heaven, because as Christians, we're very quick to just basically eat our own, basically throw stones at each other and point out each other's weaknesses and all that, instead of loving each other, and understand that we're all in this fight together. instead of alienating people. So, I mean, as a non-Christian, look at that, like, why would I ever want to be a part of that? Because as soon as you screw up, you're done.
That's right.
You know, and that should be the polar, it should be the opposite of that. If you screw up, people should be running to you to help bring you back.
And what an amazing, time we're talking about that right there,
Yeah.
right? It's like, what are we doing for these guys?
I mean, if Jesus wouldn't cast stones, then why should we?
That's right. Speaking of that,
Oh, sorry.
no, it's, dude, you and me are jiving into this. It's quite cool. So let's talk about that. So if somebody would turn to these verses, so Matthew 15, 18 through 20, and then Ephesians 4:15 and Colossians 4:6. So if you guys would turn to those, and somebody would read Matthew 15, 18 through 20 to start with.
I've got Matthew.
Okay, go ahead.
But what comes out of the mouth proceeds from the heart, and this defiles a person. For out of the heart comes evil thoughts, murder, adultery, sexual immorality, theft, false witness, slander. These are what defile a person. But to eat with unwashed hands does not defile anyone.
So think of it like, he's talking about your words that come out. It's the stones that we're throwing, right? If you're throwing stones at somebody out of judgment, then that's coming from not a good place in your heart, right? That's Jesus straight up talking about that. And of course, one of the, I didn't even put the moment when Jesus told everybody, let those without sin cast the first stone, right? That's a perfect example of somebody going, or Jesus saying to everybody, look, you don't have the right to throw a stone, okay? How about Ephesians 4:15?
Instead, speaking the truth in love, we will grow to become, in every respect, the mature body of Him who is the head, that is Christ.
I think that's, I don't know if that's become a buzzword or what, but to speak the truth in love, right? So as people that want, speak the truth in love. What does that look like? Let's just go there for a second. What does it look like to speak the truth in love in a situation where we could throw stones?
It's one thing to point out somebody's sins, another thing to help somebody with their sin.
Right.
And that's where I think the love comes from. You can call it out all day, but that doesn't, yes, there's an act of love in calling out somebody else's sins, but I think to do it really in love, you've got to take to that next step and help somebody.
It's like with our kids too. When our kids screw up, we don't say, man, you screwed up. That's just horrible. And you just walk away. You help correct it. Like, hey, you screwed up. Okay, well, let's figure this out. Let's make it right. And let's not do this, that kind of thing. But as soon as we all become adults, it's like, I don't mind pointing out your fault, but I'm going to leave you in your fault. Instead of pointing out your fault, and I'm loving you enough to get you out.
Right.
And hopefully you don't go back.
Right.
So.
Well, speaking truth in love, right? Love also means relationship, right? So if I have a relationship with you, James, but I'm not willing to speak truth to you, then do I love you? You can look at it that way too. But also, if I don't know you and I'm like, hey, here's a bunch of truth, you're going to be like, get away from me, dude. Like, you don't even know me, right? And so there has to be both parts of that. Love means relationship, right? And if I love you enough, then I'm going to have a conversation with you and guide you and do the best I can.
And I almost wish that love came first in the way it was written. But I mean, I think it's got to be equal, 100% of both, right? I heard somebody, it wasn't somebody, it was my sister. She talked about this whole idea between the balance of grace and obedience, right? And how do you find that balance? And she said to me straight up, she's like, there isn't a balance. It's 100% of both. You can't. It's not like 50-50 or something. It's 100% of both. And so when you hear that verse that says, speak the truth in love, those two things must be in conjunction with each other, because when one is missing, like Zach said, when one is missing, the other one's missing also. Like if you're not speaking truth, then you don't really love that person. But if you love that person and, whatever, the opposite. Okay, read Colossians 4:6.
Let your conversation be always full of grace, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how to answer everyone.
That's right. So when we speak, we must speak out of grace, right? As in, I'm not speaking to you because I am better than you or I've got this figured out. I'm speaking to you because for me, it's because I can relate to you, right? That's whenever I speak. So Think about this. These are the things that I want to leave you guys with. This is a quote from the book. O'Neill says, Shimei threw stones, David threw himself on the mercy of God. David refused to allow Shimei's thoughtless words to have any undue influence on him. Will you do the same when a Shimei comes your way? So what are you going to do whenever you get stones thrown at you? That we skip that question, but have you guys ever been the brunt of stones being thrown, truthful or not? And how will you react? So the question that we leave with today is, will you be as forgiving as David? Will you be as penitent as Shimei? Other thoughts or comments before we wrap up?
So wasn't David a murderer?
Yes, adulterer slash. As a matter of fact,
So he wasn't wrong. Shimei.
it's true, right? Right. I think about, anytime we throw stones, there's a grain of truth, right? Anytime we can blast somebody, there's always a grain of truth to it. So I think you're right.
And that's why he said the Lord told him what to say and let him speak.
Mhm. And I would hope also that David heard that and he's like, you know what? No, he's right. I'm a train wreck. So like,
Yeah, I may not have killed Saul, but
right,
I've killed.
right. So let him curse.
Yeah, you're right. I mean,
I know, right? Well, and a nice Sapphira from just there's examples when grace was not. Yeah, it's wild, right? And let's be thankful that Shimei's stone was not as accurate as David's stone against Goliath. What if, right? Were they all wearing helmets? Were they wearing armor so that way they were just getting clinked on instead of actually getting hurt by these rocks that were being thrown? Because what if God had anointed that one stone Shimei's to hit David right between the eyes?
I'm with you on the political stuff, though. I mean, that's one of the most weakest times as a government transition. David's about to go down. I mean, you maybe have some groups of Saul wanting to come back and take, try to claim the right to the throne and some of that stuff. I mean, that's why the scripture says that it was secured. That, the house of David, that was all secured.
I was thinking the wisdom of Solomon keeping Shimei in
Exactly.
place where you can go out and get people to back him up.
See, that's why I like teaching. I'm like Trent. If y'all have ever talked to Trent, he's like, I love teaching because it gets me to where it gets me thinking. Because I would have not spent this much time thinking about the story, right? But wow, the political back and forth and the turmoil of that time. I guess if we'd stop and read 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st and 2nd Kings really closely, it would make a great movie, right? You can't make this stuff up.
Well, I like the book too because it points out from the fool's perspective. You know what I'm saying? To where a lot of times you just glance over this stuff. This is not, a lot of times it's not the meat of what you're trying to get to. This is just the peripheral stuff.
Yep.
But it makes a big difference because we can learn lessons from these people. So
Totally. That's the idea, right? Is that we learn from all this. So thanks for today. Another good lesson. So next week, who's next week? I don't even know yet. Next week is Coffee and Phineas, praying priest, praying with an E, not an A. Praying priest. Okay. And I'm going to admit to you that I don't even know about this story yet. So here we go. We'll all be learning together next week. Okay? And I don't know how many. It's the day after Christmas. No, 2 days after Christmas. So I don't know how many of us will be here. We'll be back in town. But if not, go read about the story, pick the book up. It's good stuff. So all right, y'all have a great rest of your Sunday.
thanks, Shane.